Semicolons. Another punctuation mark that you will encounter is the semicolon. Like most punctuation marks, the semicolon can be used in a variety of ways. The semicolon indicates a break in the flow of a sentence, but functions differently than a period or a comma. When you encounter a semicolon while reading aloud, this represents a good place to pause and take a breath. Semicolon to join two independent clauses. Use a semicolon to combine two closely related independent clauses. Relying on a period to separate the related clauses into two shorter sentences could lead to choppy writing. Using a comma could create an awkward run-on sentence. Correct. Be sure to wear clean, comma, well-pressed clothes to the interview. Semicolon. Appearances are important. In this case, writing the independent clauses as two sentences separated by a period is correct. So be sure to wear clean, comma, well-pressed clothes to the interview, period. Appearances are important. And so if you use a semicolon, it helps make the shorter sentences flow better together, especially if the shorter sentences are all interrelated. So I always tell students that when they write their 3 reasons for their thesis statement, they should use semicolons to separate the independent clauses. So for instance, if I say something like smoking is dangerous for a person's health because smoking causes lung cancer, semicolon. Smoking causes throat cancer, semicolon. And smoking causes stomach cancer. So you can use semicolons for the first 2 sentences, and then you use an and. And so I tell students that they can use semicolons when writing out the reasons for their thesis statement, because a semicolon is kind of like a shortcut for and. You can also use semicolons to join items in a list. When the items in the list already require commas, semicolons help the reader distinguish between items in a list. Correct. The color combinations we can choose from are black, comma, white, comma, and gray, semicolon, green, comma, brown, comma, and black, semicolon, or red, comma, green, comma, and brown. By using semicolons in this sentence, the reader can easily distinguish between the 3 sets of colors. So use semicolons to join 2 clauses. Do not use semicolons with coordinating conjunctions such as and, or, and but. You can also use semicolons before a transition word as well to separate 2 sentences that are joined together by a conjunctive adverb or transition word. So use a semicolon. Key takeaways. Use a semicolon to join 2 independent clauses. Use a semicolon to separate items in a list when those items already require a comma. And then the next thing we're going to cover is going to be chapter 13, section 3, colons. And so the colon. The colon is another punctuation mark used to indicate a full stop. Use a colon to introduce lists, quotes, examples, and explanations. You can also use a colon after the greeting in business letters and memos. Dear hiring manager, colon, to colon, human resources. From, colon, Deanna Dean. Colons to introduce a list. Use a colon to introduce a list of items. Introduce the list with an independent clause. The team will tour 3 states, colon, New York, comma, Pennsylvania, comma, and Maryland. I have to take 4 courses this semester, colon, composition, comma, statistics, comma, ethics, comma, and Italian. Colons to introduce a quote. You can use a colon to introduce a quote. Mark Twain said it best, colon, quotation marks. When in doubt, tell the truth, quotation mark. If a quote is longer than 40 words, skip a line after the colon and indent the left margin of the quote 5 spaces, because quotations longer than 40 words use line spacing and indentation to indicate a quote. Quotation marks are not necessary. My father always loved Mark Twain words, colon. There are basically 2 types of people. People who accomplish things, comma, and people who claim to have accomplished things, period. The first group is less crowded. Tip. Long quotations, which are 40 words or more, are called block quotations. Block quotations frequently appear in longer essays and research papers. And so if you're doing an APA or MLA in-text citation and your in-text citation is longer than 3 lines, you would use a block quotation. Colons to introduce examples or explanations. Use a colon to introduce an example or to further explain an idea presented in the first part of a sentence. The first part of the sentence must always be an independent clause. That is, it must stand alone as a complete thought with a subject and a verb. Do not use a colon after phrases like such as or for example. Our company offers many publishing services, colon, writing, editing, and reviewing. Incorrect. Our company offers many publishing services such as, colon, writing, editing, and reviewing. And so I've seen that mistake so many times that people will write such as and then colon. So that's not, it's incorrect to do that. Capitalize the first letter following a colon for a proper noun, the beginning of a quote, or the first letter of another independent clause. Do not capitalize if the information following the colon is not a complete sentence. A proper noun. We visited 3 countries, colon. Capitalized Belize, Honduras, comma, Belize, comma, Honduras, comma, and El Salvador. And so all 3 of those country names are capitalized because they are proper nouns. And they have commas in between each of them because they are nouns that are in a list of series. Beginning of a quote. My mother loved this line from Hamlet. And then you put a comma, not a comma, you put a colon at the beginning of a quote. My mother loved this line from Hamlet, colon, to thine own self be true. Use a colon between 2 independent clauses. There are drawbacks to modern technology, colon. My brother's cell phone died and he lost a lot of phone numbers. Incorrect. The recipe is simple, colon, tomato, basil, and avocado. Key takeaways. Use a colon to introduce a list, a quote, or an example. Key takeaways. Use a colon after a greeting in business letters and memos. And then chapter 13, we're also going to do quotes. So the next chapter, we're going to talk about quotes. So quotation marks. Quotation marks sets off a group of words from the rest of the text. Use quotation marks to indicate direct quotations of another person's words or to indicate a title. Quotation marks always appears in pairs. A direct quotation is an exact account of what someone said or wrote. To include a direct quotation in your writing, enclose the words in quotation marks. An indirect quotation is a restatement of what someone said or wrote. An indirect quotation does not use the person's exact words. You do not need to use quotation marks for an indirect quotation. So here's an example of a direct quotation. Carly said, comma, quote, beginning quotation mark, I'm not ever going back there ever again, ending quotation mark. Indirect quotation. Carly said that she would never go back there again. So when you're reporting on what someone else said, that's an indirect quotation. And then when you cite what someone else exactly said, That's a direct quotation. Most word processing software is designed to catch errors in grammar, spelling, and punctuation. While this can be a useful tool, it is better to be well acquainted with the rules of punctuation than to leave the thinking to a computer. Properly punctuated writing will convey your meaning clearly. Consider the subtle shifts in meaning in the following sentences. The client said he thought our manuscript was garbage. The client said, comma, beginning quotation mark, he thought our manuscript was garbage, ending quotation mark. The first sentence reads as an indirect quote in which the client does not like the manuscript, but did he actually use the word garbage? So this would be alarming. Or has the speaker paraphrased and exaggerated the client's words? The second sentence reads as a direct quote from the client, but who is he in the sentence? Is it a third party? Word processing software will not catch these kind of mistakes because the sentences are not grammatically incorrect. However, the meanings of the sentences are not the same. Understanding punctuation will help you write what you mean, and in this case could save a lot of confusion around the office. Punctuating direct quotation. Quotation marks show readers another person's exact words. Often you will want to identify who is speaking. You can do this at the beginning, middle, or end of the quote. Notice the use of commas and capitalized words. Beginning, Madison said, comma, let's stop at the farmer's market to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner, quotation mark. Middle, let's stop at the, beginning quotation mark. Let's stop at the farmer's market, ending quotation mark. Madison said, beginning quotation mark, to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner, ending quotation mark. End. Let's stop at the farmer's market to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner, Madison said. Speaker not identified. Let's stop at the farmer's market to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner. Always capitalize the first letter of a quote, even if it is not the beginning of a sentence. When using identifying words in the middle of a quote, the beginning of the second part of the quote does not need to be capitalized. Use commas between identifying words and quotes. Quotation marks must be placed after commas and periods. Place quotation marks after question marks and the exclamation points only if the question or exclamation is part of the quoted text. So question is part of the quoted text. The new employee asked, comma, quotation, beginning quotation mark, when is lunch? Question mark, quotation mark, ending quotation mark. Question is not part of a quoted text. Did you ever hear her say you were the next Picasso? And then you have the quotation mark and then the comma. Exclamation is part of a quoted text. My supervisor beamed. Quotation mark. Thanks for all your hard work. Exclamation point, and then quotation mark. Exclamation is not part of the quoted text. He said single-handedly, quotation, single-handedly saved the company thousands of dollars. Quotation mark and exclamation mark. Use single quotation marks to show a quotation within a quotation. Teresa said, comma, Teresa said, comma, beginning quotation mark, I wanted to take my dog to the festival, comma, but the man at the gate said, comma, single quotation, no dogs allowed, single quotation, quotation mark, ending quotation mark, beginning quotation mark. When you say, comma, single quotation mark, I can't help it, single quotation mark, comma, what exactly does this mean, question mark, ending quotation mark, beginning quotation mark. The instructions say, comma, single quotation mark, tighten the screws one at a time, ending single quotation mark, ending double quotation mark. Use quotation marks around titles of short works of writing. such as essays, songs, poems, short stories, and chapters in books. Usually the titles of longer works such as books, magazines, albums, newspaper, and novels are italicized. Quotation mark. Annabel Lee, quotation mark, is one of my favorite romantic poems. The New York Times, italicized, has been in publication since 1851. In many businesses, the difference between exact wording and a paraphrase is extremely important. For legal purposes or for the purposes of doing a job correctly, it can be important to know exactly what the client, customer, or supervisor said. Sometimes important details can be lost when instructions are paraphrased. Use quotes to indicate exact words where needed, and let your coworkers know the source of the quotation, client, customer, peer, etc. Key takeaways. Use quotation marks to enclose direct quotes and titles of short works. Use single quotation marks to enclose a quote within a quote. Do not use any quotation marks for indirect quotations. And so if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the Professor H Writing channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at any time.